This is volume 26 and bad movie fights versus good movie fights. Martial arts movies used to be top tier of action movies, but over recent years, there's been a sharp decline in mainstream martial arts movies. But why? Let's explore. In the previous 25 volumes, we learned that a good fight should have stakes, clarity, and editing that best serves the action. We've also learned that as video games evolve, they influence films, and vice versa. Anything with shaky camera is a major no-no. Anything with choppy editing to cover up actors who cannot fight is a major no-no. And remember, no gunfights allowed. Let's do this. Let's start off with a good fight. The 1972 classic Enter the Dragon is famous for two things. This, and of course him. This is the iconic tournament scene from the movie. Now, despite being one of the most notorious fight scenes in movie history, it does have its flaws. It's far from perfect, the angles aren't great, also the impacts from contact is often obscured by the person given the contact. The angles aren't very dynamic, ranging from haphazard mid-shots to poorly framed wides. But what truly makes the scene is great storytelling. Lee is obviously a superior opponent to this guy. But O'Hara keeps coming back for more. In fact, he's rather angered and humiliated, forcing him to use illegal methods to try and beat Lee, ending with this moment. It's truly brutal and one of the greatest moments in cinema history. So the storytelling is wonderful, but also Lee's intensity is the true standout here. His facial expressions, his form, and his vocal inflections are cinema defining. Enter the Dragon is a significant film in many ways. It was the first US-Hong Kong co-production and had a rare Asian lead in a role in a Western film. And it made Lee a true star at the time, with Lee choreographing all the fights himself. He emphasized real martial arts over showmanship, combining Wing Chun boxing and Jeet Kune Do. Also, the scene has no stunt doubles, no wires. It's just Lee's speed, precision, and control. So it's all the more shocking to know that for years, Lee was never taken seriously. Despite being born in America, San Francisco, Lee faced Hollywood rejection for years due to racism, always seeming to be the sidekick in TV shows. But this was his big moment, which makes it all the more sad that he didn't get to see the fame through. Whilst the film was shot in 1972, it was released in 1973, and just 6 days later, Lee passed away, with the film becoming a worldwide phenomenon, grossing $400 million on an $850,000 budget. It cemented Lee's posthumous global superstardom, forever changing martial arts and action cinema. The scene is the very definition of visceral, letting Lee do all the work and letting the minimal camera work assist him. This was the blueprint for all future tournament or prove yourself battles in action cinema, and influenced so many other films, and most importantly, this specific video game, which went on to shape the video game industry as well as many movies. And whilst I've covered some of the awful fight scenes in the original Street Fighter movie in previous volumes, I want to focus on this terrible fight scene from Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li. Terrible movie by all counts, but this scene is shockingly bad. Let's start off with the grunting from Vega. Now, I'm no Street Fighter connoisseur, nor have I played the game in ages, but I do not remember Vega grunting. Does he have asthma? Why is he grunting like that? He shouldn't be walking around unassisted, much less exerting himself in physical battle like that. However, taken away from that is this incredible line.
No wonder you wear a mask. I'd hide that face too.
Okay, so the written line itself isn't the best, but it's also not the worst. The line delivery is confusing, and by that I mean the actress seems confused. Now, for all of you Superman TV show fans, you'll know exactly who this actress is, and she's awful in this movie. But enough beating around the bush. You guys came here for a deep analysis of this fight, and here it is. It's shit. Now, that much is evidently obvious, but how could it have been improved? Well, firstly, it's too dark. Typically, filmmakers make dark scenes in a movie for a number of reasons, but the most common are to create atmosphere, to hide bad VFX, or to hide bad action, or in this case, fighting. This certainly attempted the first reason and failed. Instead, it looks cheap and underlit, and the third thing is clearly true. The darkness is hiding so many deficiencies in the fighting. The impact lacks, well, impact. Additionally, the sound effects, or lack thereof, make the scene even worse. As Chun-Li hits the floor, no sound is heard. In fact, when any impact is made, they all sound like very soft thuds, or just make no sound at all. A stark contrast to the sound we heard here. So Enter the Dragon solidified the popularity of kung fu-based martial arts movies in mainstream cinema. But what existed before Enter the Dragon? Well, it's commonly thought that the first ever martial arts movie was the burning of the Red Lotus Temple in 1928. But it was the Shaw Brothers movies in the 60s all the way up into the 80s that had a really significant impact on cinema, with classics such as Five Deadly Venoms, The 36th Chamber of Shaolin, and Shaolin Temple. All are hugely iconic kung fu movies in the truest of forms, and sadly, not movies we see today. The closest we got to a return to that age was the Ip Man movie series starring Donnie Yen. And Ip Man 4 takes us back to this guy. Well, not actually the real guy, but someone acting or pretending to be him. You see, Lee was actually a student of Ip Man in real life, and this scene, which is fictional, is a bit of a gimmicky call out to their relationship, with Lee a bit cocky and showy, and Ip Man more subdued and humble. Now, the Ip Man series started off quite grounded, with deeply woven messages about sacrifice and choices. But by the time Ip Man 4 came around, we had seen cameos from people like Mike Tyson. And in fairness, his scene is actually pretty good, and them shoehorning in the legendary Scott Adkins for good measure. So this scene, which again is fictional, kind of follows the lack of structure that this series had at this point. And that's why this is going to be our second bad scene of this video. Now, to give the scene some credit, the camera work is actually great. There's a lack of pointless cuts, and this is how you liked a dark scene, Chun-Li. But honestly, this scene is actually very corny. The idea of some random guy attacking Bruce Lee in the street and then all the way in the alleyway is just too far-fetched. Not to mention the inclusion of the nunchucks, which Lee just happens to take and perform the literal same moves that he did in Enter the Dragon. This is all just a station too far from the nostalgia train. Now, what did we say at the top of this video? A good scene should have stakes, clarity, and the editing should complement the scene. But the stakes are minimal to zero, and the clarity is just nonsensical. Danny Chan, who plays Bruce Lee in the scene, is clearly talented, but the scene has a real lack of bite. Unlike the last fight scene in Ip Man 3, which is just great and maybe the best of the series. However, I do digress and delay, because after calling the last scene bad, I might be just about to piss everyone off yet again with my next good scene. Okay, so this is the scene I used in my first ever video in this whole series, but I didn't really discuss it. Now, I'm not going to delve into the controversies behind this scene.
Go suck a dick.
I've done it before in volume 4 or 5, I've lost track. But yeah, let's look at this scene from a pure filmmaking aspect. It ticks all the boxes. The editing is spot on, the build-up is fantastic, and as per normal with a Tarantino film, it has humor, and then it has this. The impact that Lee's body makes with this car is exactly the reason why the Chung-Li scene is so bad. Now, the real debate here is if this uncouth stuntman could actually beat up Bruce Lee. And, well, the truth is, we'll never know. However, the size and weight of the two opponents is crucial, and would definitely have a huge bearing on the result. However, Bruce Lee's speed, agility, precision, know-how, and explosiveness might just give him the advantage. But what do you think? In the comments, write Lee or Pitt. So at the beginning of this video, I asked you why did martial arts movies die out in mainstream? And this was actually somewhat of a misleading question, because they were never actually mainstream. Not as a collective movement anyway. We had the buzz of the Kung Fu movies of the 70s after Enter the Dragon, but there was never a film similar to it in terms of popularity. In the 80s you had Karate Kid 1 and 2, and a couple of Van Damme movies. Jackie Chan was popular indeed, but his top grossing mainstream movie, The Big Brawl, only made $8.5 million in the US. And it wasn't until Rumble in the Bronx in the 90s that it came to US notoriety. And that in turn brought about Rush Hour 1 and Rush Hour 2. But again, there weren't other movies like Rush Hour 1 and 2. The Matrix isn't really a martial arts / kung fu movie. Now we had successes like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and also Hero, and even a movie which we associate as being a recent martial arts hit movie, The Raid, only made $4.1 million on its release. And this actually might shock you, because it shocked me, but The Raid 2, a much bigger film in terms of scope, budget, and marketing, made less, with just $2.6 million in America. In fact, worldwide, it only made $6.6 million, despite the fact that all your mates have seen it and everyone knows the iconic scenes. Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is definitely considered a kung fu martial arts movie, was a roaring success, for sure. But that was 3 years ago. When was the last massive hit? Can we say the John Wick movies are kung fu movies? Well, definitely not. Kung Fu, yes, but not Kung Fu. If Keanu was going around using his bare fists and feet, would this franchise be as successful? Highly doubtful. On Back, the first movie in this video, only made $20 million worldwide. And that's despite having this incredible scene. So really these movies have always been niche. Once a genre of precision and philosophy, martial art films have been sidelined by superhero movies, shaky cam, and streaming algorithms. But the fight isn't over, it's just gone underground. And in fact, it's always been underground, and it's just fine being there. So which fights do you think were the best today, and which bad and good movie scenes should I cover in the next volume? Let me know in the comments. This has been Bad Movie Fights versus Good Movie Fights, Volume 26.